Hello and welcome. I am Republic of Sandless and this is my video review for Call of Duty Ghosts. Call of Duty is a long-running first-person shooter series and has become one of the most popular computer game series in history. It's renowned for its fast-paced and addictive gameplay, and Call of Duty Ghosts continues some of these traditions with some minor improvements and a couple of rather unusual design decisions which don't necessarily work out for the best, but are at the very least an honest effort on the part of Infinity Ward, the developer, to revive the series. Regrettably, Call of Duty Ghosts is probably the last major installment of Call of Duty from a purely profitable perspective for quite some time. It's really not the revival of the series that would have been needed in order to keep it afloat. This review will cover the multiplayer component of Call of Duty Ghosts, the single-player campaign of Call of Duty Ghosts, and the single and cooperative campaign of Extinction Mode. I'm going to start this review with the single-player campaign. Many people who play Call of Duty completely gloss over the single-player campaign, and it seems that Activision have decided not to fight this and rather to just produce an essentially half-assed single-player campaign. And it is very half-assed, basically a collection of bizarre mini-games jammed together and paced in such a way that you get so little time with any particular game mechanic that everything feels shallow and watered down. Okay, admittedly you're not bored at any point while playing the game, but you don't feel in any way fulfilled either. The game's narrative is terrible. It focuses on this father and son's dynamic, which doesn't seem at all relatable. I understand that for some people who are from military families, this thing might be relatable. You might think, oh yeah, I was with my dad and he joined the US Army Rangers and then I joined the US Army Rangers and so this is relatable to me. But for me, a European who doesn't have any affiliations with the armed forces, it doesn't make any sense. Speaking of the whole European thing, I couldn't help but notice that the villains in this storyline use the same flag. Okay, not exactly the same flag, but they use the 12 stars of the European Union flag, which is rather strange. They're supposed to be Latin American, but it seems like Infinity Ward, the developers, just decided to go, hey, let's just pick those Xenos over there, those other nationalities, and say that they're coming to get us, because we can't very well do another storyline about the bloody Russians. Also, you're supposed to care about the dog in the storyline a lot. As one reviewer remarked, they spend more time mourning the dog than they do mourning the black guy who gets shot early on, which seemed rather strange. The dog is just a plot and gameplay device. I couldn't for the life of me feel any sort of attachment for the dog. They keep talking about the dog, they keep mentioning the dog by name, but the dog, called Riley, never seemed at all relevant to me. The villain doesn't seem to make any sort of sense. The principal antagonist doesn't seem to make any sense to me. Apparently he's this indoctrinated US soldier who turned rogue and decided to join with the Latin Americans to, I don't know, undermine the world or something. But it just doesn't seem at all plausible that he would suddenly turn into this, from an American armed forces killing machine to a Latin American armed forces killing machine. It just doesn't really make sense how that happens. They try to explain that it's something to do with torture techniques, but it's not at all plausible. The ending of the game, and both endings of the game actually, there's a secret ending that happens following the credits and an ending that happens before the credits are finished. And both of these endings are essentially crap. Throughout the entire campaign, your character is complimented. Everybody keeps telling you how proud they are of you. It's kind of weird. And frankly, I don't get it very much. It's like an ego boost for people who want to be complimented for killing folks. It just doesn't work. I understand that some people are raised in that kind of environment, but it just felt unnerving and bizarre. There are so many problems with the single player campaign on this. I could spend the entire review just covering that, so I'm going to stop now and move on to the next section. Call of Duty Ghosts introduces a new cooperative single and multiplayer mode. It replaces the previous survival mode from Spec Ops mode in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. This new mode really doesn't compare to survival in Modern Warfare 3. It's called Extinction, and in it you fight aliens. It's quite bizarre. Basically, playing Extinction mode is like watching Infinity Ward trying to ape their sort of co-developer, Treyarch. In fact, that could be a suitable summary for most of Call of Duty Ghosts overall. From the campaign changes to the multiplayer changes to this new Extinction mode, a lot of it seems lifted from Treyarch. Extinction mode was horribly underwhelming, feels very bizarre in the way it's structured at times, feels rather painted by numbers. It feels like every single action you do is rather controlled. There's only a limited number of things you can do. It doesn't feel as chaotic or as unique as anything in Modern Warfare 3. Ultimately, it feels too scripted. It feels like you need to level up a good bit before you stand even a half-decent chance of surviving in Extinction mode. On the plus side, it doesn't have the overly convoluted electrics and other devices of Zombies mode in Black Ops. Zombies mode in Black Ops had all of these elaborate switches you had to go onto a Wikia page in order to figure out. You had to go online, look up how to do everything because there was basically no indication as to how to do it in game. All it says to you when you spawn is find a way to turn on the power, but for each map you don't necessarily know how to do that. In Extinction mode, thankfully, a lot of that frustration is removed, but it's not worth playing. Call of Duty Ghosts multiplayer is refined, improved, but ultimately more boring than any previous Call of Duty. I attribute its being boring to the lack of machine pistols. Machine pistols were a great category in Modern Warfare 3 and Modern Warfare 2. But they were notoriously hard to balance properly, so they've been cut. Now, Call of Duty Ghosts has refined a number of other things that do make the game better but also make it slower, one of which are large maps. Personally, I think this was the right decision. It means that the player respawns are miles away from each other, and people can't simply camp at different spawns and pick people off, which means that the game is not as frustrating. Also, because of these larger maps, the game feels more strategic, which is fantastic. It means that where you position yourself often improves your odds in a gunfight a lot more than just simply your raw reaction time. There are flank routes everywhere in this game. You can outflank people constantly, which means that running a short-range class is not as much of a disadvantage as it used to be. And running a long-range class does not necessarily leave you as vulnerable or as immobile as it used to. Kill streaks have been dialed back. Of course, these days they're called point streaks, but let's just be honest here, they're a lot weaker than they used to be. They're still good, they're still quite potent, but not so potent that they wreck the game like they used to. And I have to admit I'm quite happy with that. I'm going to say something really controversial here, but I've never been a massive fan of point streaks, kill streaks, whatever you want to call them. I don't find them fun. I find them frustrating. They make the game unbalanced, they make it uneven, they mean that somebody who's winning in the beginning of a game continues to have a successive lead throughout the game, and it feels like every game mode is decided within the first 5 minutes or so, with the exception perhaps of Search and Destroy. Call of Duty Ghosts also has too many multiplayer game modes. It simply isn't designed to be a sustainable game that relies on only a handful of game modes and lasts for a number of years within its community. It's designed to be an annual release so that people will get really sick of the game because they'll find that nobody is playing their favorite game mode until the new game is released and there's a sudden spike in interest again. It's a rather bizarre construction. It's seemingly designed to be flawed by default, by choice. It is an intentional design flaw, in my opinion. Something that isn't so much an intentional design flaw, however, but just simply a really bad decision, is the introduction of the Squads mode. Now, Squads mode makes essentially zero sense to me. Why it exists, I don't know. Why it's present at all, I don't know. Why we're supposed to care about it, I have no idea. What you do in the Squads mode is you create a branch of characters, just a bunch of characters together in a squad. You level each of these characters up independently, except within the Squads mode themselves, where the AI play most of the characters for you, or sometimes you could get a teammate, somebody who's a friend of yours, to play your characters for you if, I don't know, you can find somebody who worships the ground you step on and will do absolutely anything you tell them, because frankly that seems like an incredibly futile thing to do. It sounds horribly boring. Perhaps some clans do that, but it doesn't really make sense from where I'm sitting. The multiplayer in Call of Duty Ghosts is simply overblown. The maps being larger works. There being countless game modes does not work. There being multiple soldiers is fun, but it's not actually necessary. Essentially, there's too much going on in Call of Duty Ghosts multiplayer, and it would have needed to be dialed back. The new Search and Rescue mode basically never gets played. You can look at the PC version of Call of Duty Ghosts and see the players in each game mode. The only game mode that seems to be reliably populated is Team Deathmatch. That's pretty much all. Even Free-for-All is not reliably populated anymore. It's actually quite sad, and this is only a few months after the game has been released. I'm already beginning to regret my buying a season pass along with this game, but I think that Call of Duty Ghosts is a great way to round out the Call of Duty series. It's a great summary of all of the previous Call of Duty games over the last half-decade or so, and ultimately it's a good game. It's a good game with some really great set-piece moments. The only thing is, you have to be prepared to accept that it's not going to be as satisfying as previous releases, and it's probably going to be the last really, really popular Call of Duty game for a long time. This is pretty much the death of the series, until it's resuscitated maybe in 10 years' time by some totally bizarre reincarnation that makes it so earth-shatteringly brilliant that everyone wants to play it all over again. Until that time comes, I'm Republic of Sandless, and this has been my review of Call of Duty Ghosts.